1 Timothy chapter 6, beginning in verse 1. Let as many servants as are under the yoke count their own masters worthy of all honor, that the name of God and his doctrine be not blasphemed. And they that have believing masters, let them not despise them, because they are brethren, but rather do them service, because they are faithful and beloved, partakers of the benefit. These things teach and exhort. So we'll pause there just for the first two verses. Why do you think it is that the Apostle Paul, he's been moving along and dealing with various relationships as he's marched through this? He's talking to Timothy and providing instruction for this young evangelist. Why do you think that he would mention slaves and their masters? Why mention slaves? You said? That's exactly right. I think that's right. If you look back, the Roman Empire, if you're looking the first century, there were so many, significant amount of people, majority of people would have had them. And so, that's why he would then address it, because it's already there. And so he deals with something that's already a part of the world, a part of the empire, a part of the culture, and he tries to teach Christians how to behave in the environment they're already in. This is already in place. Instead of providing instruction to overthrow and change, he simply says, here's how you need to behave as slave, and here's how you need to behave as a master. And that's used in different places, but especially here, he talks about the servants under the yoke. You can look at this, from the first century perspective, and certainly they would be as slaves under their masters. But he teaches them then how then they are to respond, how they are to interact, how they are to live as Christians. Now, frequently, stepping aside from first century, context and who he's writing to then, and then trying to put that in our context for today in the United States, then we wouldn't have that relationship. But we would have some relationships that possibly could have some similarities, which would be what? It's not literally a master and a slave, but what could be something that today might have application here? Your job, employer, boss, yeah, that's right. So, if you're looking from that standpoint, you've got somebody that's over you, and that would be someone that is your employer, and then, how exactly do you work with each other? You've got the employer, you've got the employee, and then both of them showing respect for each other. But there is one that has the authority and one that is under authority. But both of them, respond appropriately with each other, both of them behaving as Christians. And, in the particular passage that's under consideration, jumping back to first century for a moment, those masters were not to be abusive to the slaves. If you're looking at how they were to operate and being Christians, then they needed to act as Christians. Even though they were masters and did have slaves, they had to act like one. And so that had to do with their interaction with them. And what about a slave? Now that he's a Christian, can he just say, well, I don't have to, I don't have to respond to my master. I'm going to walk away from that. No, he still has to stay in that relationship, and he has to show respect and work hard. And that's kind of the principle that's given there if you're looking at it from a first century perspective. And you can kind of see how those things would echo over into our application as well. And so he says, let as many servants as are under the yoke count their own masters worthy of honor. So, you've got the master that's a Christian, and so you count them worthy of honor, that the name of God and His doctrine be not blasphemed. And so, how we interact with each other, whether we are under authority or in authority, determines whether we respect and honor the name of God and His doctrine so that it's not blasphemed. And so that's important in the relationships that you have here. Then you go down to verse 2, and he says, and they that have believing masters. So speaking of those that are under and that their masters are believing, do not let them despise them, because they're brethren. If you have a master then that obeys the gospel but does not then release you, and you're still a slave, you don't have a right to get bitter or to take that out on that master, because you feel like, okay, if that master obeys the gospel, then surely things will change from that standpoint. Then the one that is under authority, he is not to despise him. Why? They're brethren. They're brothers in Christ. But he says, rather, do them service, because they are faithful and beloved, partakers of the benefit. So if the one that is above, the one that is in authority, obeys the gospel, then we continue to serve, and we give an appropriate service to them. Why? Because they are brethren, partakers of the benefit, and faithful and beloved. And so he says, these things teach and exhort. So it's really interesting that you've got this dynamic that for us doesn't relate as much because we're not in that system. As far as I know, none of us have ever been a slave in that way. There might be some wives that would argue, but we've never been slaves, So it's hard for us to kind of relate to this, but when we look back at the first century, he's having to deal with this because that's the environment that they're living in. That's the society that exists. And so he's providing this teaching so that if you have individuals that are obeying the gospel, you keep serving them. And of course, this not only would have application here, but think about those that were of authority and of Caesar's house that did obey the gospel. The Bible says they did. And they would have had people under them. And they would have had people over them, that maybe that were not Christians, or vice versa. You have people that are in authority that obey the gospel, and they have people under them. And so this helps in a lot of different relationships that may exist for those of the first century. Any comments before we take off and move to verse 3? Right. Right. So, you have that respect, whether or not you could use it today, whether your boss is a Christian or not a Christian, or back then, if your master was a Christian or not a Christian. Either way, the principle that was laid down is honor them, respect them, and work hard. And the expectation for you as a Christian doesn't change if your unbelieving master becomes a Christian. You still have to do your part to live the Christian life, and you have an opportunity to set an example before them. And if they obey the gospel, great. Things haven't changed. You still have your obligation then to fulfill your role one way or the other, and I thank you for the comment. Any other? Right. Yes, it would. It would. Philemon, as Brother Nunley mentioned, is a good example that kind of shows that, in which he was going to have to go back. He was a runaway slave, and there's correspondence sent with him, but he's going to have to go back and the master is told, receive him back, receive him differently, receive him as a brother, but you still need to receive him back. And then Onesimus, he had to go back and still be a slave. So you've got a unique situation there, but certainly you've got the application again in a real world situation with names of the master and the slave, and where they're trying to resolve some issue that is there, but there was still master and slave. There's just an added nuance now that the slave is now a Christian. Master was a Christian, slave ran away, slave obeyed the gospel, slave was sent back as a Christian. And with correspondence saying, receive back this slave, forgive him, and receive him as a brother. And so it should mean that the master would treat the slave differently. But then again, if you're a Christian and the person that's under you is not a Christian, you shouldn't be treating them bad. You shouldn't treat the one that's not a Christian terrible and the one that's a Christian really well. But there definitely is a different nuance because now you're brothers in Christ.
Well, even of course what Peter talks about in 1 Peter 2 is submitting there. Someone's mistreating you, but it really in both of these passages you got the example, and the example that you should be to others, and the rising up, and maybe the master's mistreating you, and if he's not a Christian, you still submit to him, because that's your role. And then by your good example, you make convert him. But you got a Christian master, and now you're a Christian. You submit to him. That's your role. And, you're setting that standard that others see. This is what I'm trying to live like Christ. Show that. Both cases.
Right.
Two different perspectives. One from mistreatment and one from just the role of men.
Right. With Philemon, there was the added nuance of the runaway had done wrong, and I think the expectation is that he's going to be in big trouble. What that would look like, I don't know. I'm not there, but it would not have been good. So now at least he's been able to come back and to be received back because of the correspondence. Any other comments before we take on? Okay, thank you for your comments, everyone. Verse 3, if any man teach otherwise and consent not to wholesome words, that is sound, we would say sound words or wholesome words, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the doctrine which is according to godliness, he is proud, knowing nothing, but doting about questions and strife of words, whereof cometh envy, strife, railings, evil surmisings, perverse disputings of men of corrupt minds, and destitute of truth, supposing that gain is godliness. From such withdraw thyself. Now, I'm going to pause there for a minute before we transition to the next part of this. So, someone tries to come along and teach something different. Now, what do you suppose that means? Teach what? Okay. Absolutely that, because that's the verses that precede it. Would it mean more, or is it just that? Is it just that, or is it inclusive of maybe some other teachings he's had? I don't know. I'm just asking.
I would say yes. I mean, he says even the word of the Lord, even so many of the doctrine, the totality of the doctrine of Christ, as well under consideration as what previously mentioned.
As Adam mentioned. So, you can imagine when slave master and some of the talk that would exist there, and maybe some of the defiance that could come out of that. that someone would come and probably try to challenge that, and how that could cause some big problems with revolution, uprising, and who knows what. So yeah, certainly, is he saying anybody comes along and tries to do that, you shouldn't receive it. Even deviating from the teachings of the Savior, and so you're dealing with what's immediate context, then you're stepping outside of the broader, context of the teachings that he's been bringing as a whole, and then it goes even further as, the whole encompassing teaching of the Savior. And so it's including all of this, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and to the doctrine which is according to godliness. So I think, when you look at this idea of this teaching that is according to godliness, that's what's inclusive in this, and that's really what we've been describing, is if you are a master and you obey the gospel, you should follow godliness. If you're a slave and you obey the gospel, you should follow godliness. And he's laid out this pattern. And of course, and it would go back, even going back before this, and some of the discussion that we've had in the context, as he's talking about how we should interact with each other, and some of those things, all of that would fit to this doctrine or this teaching of what it means to practice godliness. But the one that rejects that idea and says basically that you can be a Christian, but you don't have to practice godliness. And I think that may be the principle that's flipped over on here. Then that individual is challenging and causing problems. Proud, because they don't want to submit either to their master or to the master, which is Jesus. Whatever place or role they're in, an individual that refuses to practice humility and submit is an individual who's proud, knowing nothing but doting about questions and strife of words, whereof cometh envy, strife, railings, and evil surmisings, perverse disputings of men of corrupt minds, destitute of the truth. So, boy, there's a lot that's crammed in there. As he says, when somebody tries to come along and bring something different, and they're trying to challenge what it means to live godly, when they start challenging the teachings of Christ, when the teachings of Christ in the Sermon on the Mount are so unique, very different than anything anybody has ever heard before, anything that's ever come out of people's mouths, is so different. To turn the other cheek, to not only, be physically involved with somebody, but to look at them is wrong because you've done that in your heart, and you start thinking about all of these things. It's not just to go kill somebody is wrong, but to hate or to despise, or to speak certain things. It goes even further as you look at the Sermon on the Mount, as Jesus begins to show what it means to be a follower of His and to live that life of godliness. And there's much more that is involved in this. And so as it's all laid out here, an individual who stands against what we would call healthy teaching or healthy words and then brings something different, then they're bringing this that would cause the strife of words, envy, railings, evil surmisings. He says, supposing that gain is godliness. Wonder why that's in there.
Any relationship you're talking about, all that represents godliness. Godly ways to interact with people. You don't have to worry about anything you don't.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really be a slave, and you do have a master in the freedom, and you don't like it. Like, you do hey, kill this guy, you do this, or whatever you are. So that's not kind of new to you.
Right.
I can kill this guy and get out of this bad situation. So maybe that's stop playing off to kill this guy.
Right. And I guess it's the end justifies the means. Or at least you begin to justify anything so that you can get to what you think is what you need or what you want. And so you can justify anything to get the gain. You sacrifice godliness in the process. Oh, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I'm flipping through different versions on my phone and looking at this verse, at that text, and in different versions, it actually says that they think that godliness is the way to make money. The gain word there is referring to dollars. I think that, I can't help but think about these speakers that go and take on these engagements that teach their doctrine, to draw big crowds. They're manipulating scripture just for the fame and fortune. Like we were watching a Benny Hinn YouTube video the other day, and old Benny Hinn repented that he had charged some obscene amount of money for him to have gone and done all of these miraculous healings. He had repented of it. He had decided to take, instead of it being $10,000, it was going to be like $7,000. He realized it was too much money, whatever the numbers were, but he had repented of taking too much money, but he still didn't take money. And you just think about, I've always been told, Max Lucado, when he was doing his business, that he was teaching the truth for a little while, and then he transitioned, stopped teaching the truth, stopped following the way, and he realized he could make more money by teaching error. And so he ran off and built this following, and then he took his own family and had his own family obey the gospel in the traditionalist sense. But he wouldn't teach it, he wouldn't preach from the pulpit, but had his own family to obey the gospel. This is all, that's hearsay on my behalf, but, you can think of different examples of people that take that avenue of, man, if I appear to be righteous, they'll do that, they'll take care of me. If I'm here praying every day at the building, people will bring me food. If I'm, helping the poor, then they'll want to donate more money to me to see how people take advantage. What is God?
Thank you. Any comments?
Maybe I'm thinking in an extreme way, but the first thing that popped into my mind when we got to this passage about thinking otherwise and something contrary to the doctrine of Christ and things that would bring about envy, strife, evil surmising, perverse disputing, and all of those things for some sort of gain. The first thing that comes to my mind is this transgender movement, where they essentially have taken the word that we identify male and female sex. They take that word and the word gender and they separate them, and they say, okay, well, gender is the way you see yourself, and so we're going to get rid of the binary, the way that God created male and female, and we're going to put a different spin on this because we're just going to use this word. It sounds different, but it's really not different. Your gender is your sex, but they separate it and they say, well, we can have millions of genders if we want. Whatever we think about, we can say that can be our gender. And those are just, those are worthless arguments because they're contrary to what we read about in the Bible. And that's the first thing that comes to my mind. But there's political gain that can be gotten from people that back that. There is monetary gain that can be gotten. Now, there is a small group, but they're screaming really loud, and there's a lot that they can gain because they're pushing all of that really, really, really hard right now. But it does nothing but bring about strife. It's evil surmise. They're perverse thoughts, perverse disputings of corrupt minds. That's exactly what those things are. But that's just the first thing that comes to my mind here.
You get down the world and then trust in God.
Yeah.
There is no truth. Worldliness versus godliness. So supposing that if you're a master and you have much, then you're godly, even if you're not godly.
We do the same thing with celebrities. We hang on every word that a celebrity says just because they're so famous.
Hmm.
Their opinion. We want to know their political stance. We want to know what's their opinion on this and that. Gold, so.
Yeah. Any other?
I think it's interesting the phrase, knowing nothing but doting about questions. There's some people that just are hung up on. I've talked to a bunch of people that they have a question, and you can give them the biblical answer, and you hand them book, chapter, and verse, and that's not true. And so they'll bounce to the next person, and they'll ask the next person, and they'll bounce to the next person, and they'll start hitting everyone kind of against each other. And that goes along with what James says about people having these ears. They're searching out for somebody to tell them what they want to hear.
Right.
They're obsessed with it. They just, I'll never trust so-and-so because they didn't answer the question right, or causing division by. I looked up again different versions, and it implies that they're just obsessed with it. One version says they are sick with a love of arguing and fighting about it. They're just obsessed with it. They have to ask these questions to prove a point or causing in these strife.
So.
Think about what we studied in Jeremiah. They asked Jeremiah to go to God. God tells them exactly what to do, and then they argue with it and say, "Well, we're not going to do that. We're going to do something else." Nothing's changed from the beginning of time. The only person that cares is the person that has an honest heart. And you go from person to person, you're just trying to find out what you want to hear.
Right. So, he says if somebody comes and teaches something different, basically, that is not according to godliness, they're just troublemakers. That's the kind of what he's driving at. They may have all these different motives and may cause a lot of different problems in different ways, but when they do not teach this and are bringing something different, then this is the result. If I'm not mistaken, the last part of this verse, anybody have the American Standard Version? You said you were looking up a bunch of them. It should omit from such withdrawal thyself. Okay, so there is a textual variant in the Greek manuscripts. I didn't know that until I was in Tanzania, and I was translating Brother Billy Bland's manuscript he had submitted, and it was on Fellowship to Fellowship. And he referenced this verse, and I was, we were translating, and I'm looking, because I'm copying and pasting, so I'm going into the Swahili, and it's not in Swahili. I was like, what is going on? Where is it? And it's because of the textual variant, because the Swahili is taken from the Greek manuscripts base that the ASV and a lot of the other translations like the ESV and New American Standard and things like that would come from. So there is a textual variant there. King James, New King James will have that. Others will not. Verse 6, he says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. I'm not sure, but it might seem to me that verse 6 can kind of tie back to what we've been talking about. I mean, if you're a slave and you're not content, you're not happy, and you want to be the master, and that can cause you to be miserable your whole life. If that's, if we're looking at just the immediate context of what he's been talking about, then that might drive a little bit of a meaning into godliness with contentment is great gain. It also may apply to the master who potentially could want to be corrupt so that he could get more gain, or to be, to have a lot more. And it was mentioned, Adam mentioned that as well. But godliness with contentment is great gain. And so you've got on one hand someone that would want to try to get gain dishonestly, But he's saying, no, godliness with contentment is actually the gain. Sometimes we look at the financial side of everything, and we think if people have all of this money, then that's the great gain. But a person can be poor, relatively speaking, in this life and be as happy as can be and go to heaven. And then a person can be rich and then live a worldly life and not have heaven as their home. You know, and that's the rich man and Lazarus. I mean, verbatim. You've got somebody that was poor, who didn't have anything, and he got, you know, Abraham's bosom is his reward. You've got a rich man, Lazarus, who, you've got the rich man, you've got the rich man who had lived worldly, who didn't care about things, but he had all the riches, and when he died, he ended up in torments. So you've got the two that are given here, and so for us, what's the most important thing? Number one, godliness, because godliness is ultimately what's going to lead to eternal life. If we don't have that, as you're going to see, he tells them to lay hold over eternal life a couple of times in this chapter. And so it's possible for a Christian to choose not to lay hold on eternal life by living as it's been described here with godliness. And so we need to make sure that as Christians, then we are living godly lives. But he says, but godliness and couple that with contentment provides great gain. And that can be the challenge, because we, having that contentment in whatever situation may come our way, can be a challenge. And you know, Satan is going to, it doesn't matter who you are or what standing you are in life, no matter where you are on the spectrum, high, low, in between. Satan is going to make, you know, try to work on you so that you're not content. That's just the truth. I mean, he'll use a lot of other devices to try to tempt you or someone else, but he's going to use that as one way to try to get at us and try to get us to sin. And so it doesn't matter if you're really far up or really down at the bottom. He's still going to, you know, again, try to come at that person and say, you know, you should be content with where you are. You need more, and so focus all your energy so that you have more. And I could see that overseas where you had people that were, you know, on the lower end of the totem pole, and the famous slogan that we see on all the vehicles is "Get rich or die trying." That's a terrible slogan, but I would see it all the time, and it just it bugged me. You know, you would rather die trying to get rich, which means you lose your life, and even in sin, which means you're trying to rob somebody and you may end up dying or doing whatever to try to get rich. But you're willing to do that and to do whatever it takes so that you can be rich. Where's the priority there? Where your treasure is, that's where your heart's going to be. And it's definitely not on anything spiritual. It's on just getting rich. It's about having money, about having things. What does the Bible say? Those things can be corrupted. Thieves can break in and steal. You don't need to set your treasure there. You need to set your treasure in heaven, you know, and focus there. In Colossians chapter 3, I think, deals a little bit with that. In Colossians chapter 3, verse 1 and 2, if you be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sitteth on the right hand of God. Set your affections on things above and not on things on the earth. For ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. And so then he says, when Christ, who is our life, shall appear, then shall you also appear with him in glory. And then he moves on to the next section and says, now put to death these things that are on the earth. And he lists all these different sins: fornication, uncleanness, inordinate affection, and so on, so on, and so forth. You know, so he's trying to get them to, again, center your focus upon God, upon your destiny, that is your eternal destiny, because riches are temporary.
You know, Hebrews 13:5, let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as you have. For he has said, I will never leave thee nor don't believe the Bible teaches we're not supposed to try to better ourselves
Right.
in our modern life, but we don't need to get our godliness to do that.
Right.
You can prosper and we can strive to gain more riches and make God out.
That's a very good point. Thank you. God has to be the center. You know, riches in and of themselves, and of course, money in and of itself, inherently is not evil. Money itself doesn't have an evil value. What is evil about that is if you have the love of money, which is the root of all evil. It's that love of money that causes the problem. Money all by itself is not evil, and when you look at the Old Testament and many other places, there were lots of people that had mild affluence. I mean, well, mildly. Abraham was very affluent. Job was very affluent, had significant possessions. But then you look at their life, and I think that's what Roger was saying. You look at their life, and look at Job. Even though he had those things, they were taken away for a time, and then they were returned. But you look at his life, and there's that godliness that's there. It was there when he had all those things, and it was there when it was all gone. He continued. When he lost all that, he didn't set out to get it all back. And then he focused on that. He just focused on continuing to serve God, and then God blessed him in the end greater than what he had, what had been removed from him throughout that trial. And so we definitely want to note in verse 6 that godliness is the most significant thing. As you're comparing worldliness and godliness, godliness has to be a part of the Christian walk. And then he adds on top of that contentment. And this is great gain. In verse 7, he says, "For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out." Yeah, that's it. I can't say anymore that I've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul, because I saw it on a Facebook meme somewhere where they had a hearse pulling one of those U-Haul trailers. So I guess that breaks the mold, right? But we all know that was just to move that trailer. It wasn't going where that person was. They're not able, you can't take it with you. We don't bring anything in. We can't take anything out. That's just the way it is. And we may be the richest person in the world. We can't take it with us. The richest person in the world may die and have nothing because they are lost. The poorest person in this world who has absolutely nothing but their life, but if they're a Christian, a faithful Christian, may gain all of glory. And so that's, and we'll wrap up verse 8. He says, "And having food and raiment, let us be therewith content." We'll pick up there next time. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your comments.